All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Maria from the Pueblo City County Library District, and today we have a special guest for our Latino Book Festival, and we have Sylvia Acevedo, and she is the author of The Path to the Stars: My Journey from Girl Scouts to Rocket Scientists, and it is a wonderful book, and I am really excited to interview Sylvia today. And I do want to let you know that we have the book in English and we also have the book in Spanish. And so you're going to have to pay attention during the interview because we'll be asking you questions from some of Sylvia's answers and you can win a book. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sylvia Acevedo. Sylvia holds a master's degree in systems engineering from Stanford University, where she was one of the first Hispanics to have earned a graduate engineering degree. She became a rocket scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. She was the chair of President Obama's White House Initiative of Educational Excellence for Hispanics and Early Childhood Leadership. She is a national speaker on education, STEM, cybersecurity, demographic trends, and leadership. So Path to the Stars: My Journey from Girl Scout to Rocket Scientist is the inspiring memoir for young readers about a Latina rocket scientist whose early life was transformed by joining the Girl Scouts and who served as CEO of the Girl Scouts of the USA. So the Girl Scouts taught her how to take control of her world, help take care of her family, and nourish her love of numbers and science. Overall, this is truly an inspirational story, and it honors Sylvia's mother, reading, math, and the Girl Scouts, and I highly recommend it. Welcome, Sylvia. Thank you for joining us.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So, Sylvia, your story really is amazing, and I just want people to understand a little bit about what made you decide to write your autobiography.
You know, I was speaking in front of kids and I was at different schools. And then one day, after my speech, I went outside the auditorium and there was this really long line. And I said, "Hey, is that the line for lunch?" And they said, "No, that's a line for the kids who want to talk with you." And I thought, that's a really long line. I'm going to be here a long time, which was fine. But I realized, you know, as I was talking to the kids, I said, "Why is it that you wanted to talk and meet with me?" And they said that we don't know anyone like you. And in many ways, your story is what I hope to be for myself. And I realized at that point I needed to write my book so that I could reach more kids. And that was really important to me. So that's why I wrote, that was the inspiration for writing the book.
That's why you chose the audience to be children.
Well, actually, and you mentioned math and science, and there's another reason I chose that audience is because if you've ever been in an elevator and the doors are closing and you can put your hand in the elevator to stop the doors from closing, I feel like middle school is that time that if you can just like imagine my book being like right in that door to hold the door, because you can still get interested in math, in science. You can still believe in the world of possibilities. It's so much easier finally in middle school. It's kind of like that last available window for so many kids. It's not impossible afterwards, but you still have this wonderful window in middle school. So I wrote my book hoping that, you know, boys and girls would get inspired to take that algebra class, to study science, and to realize that they could live a life of their dreams, just like me.
That is excellent. So how long did it take you to write your book?
You know, it took me less than a year, actually. It took a little bit longer selling the book, getting it, you know, finding an agent, you know, getting it published. But just writing it took a little bit less than a year. And also I worked with somebody who understood how to write better for middle school. students, because for me, I was used to talking to adults. So writing in a way that was more emotionally congruent with what middle school students are feeling. I remember working with my the author, the co-author, and the writer, and I would say, so she would always say to me, "But how were you feeling at the time?" I would tell her what I did, and she said, "But how did you feel?" Because that's so important in that middle school journey.
Yeah, yeah. It's middle school is a tough time period for a lot of kids. So, and it is very
Yes.
emotional.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you write in English or Spanish or both?
You know, I write in English. I tend to, when I'm on Netflix, I watch a lot in Spanish as well as English, but I write in English.
And then when you read, what language do you prefer to read in?
I love to read so much, but it's so much faster to read for me now in English, even though at first when I grew up, um, Spanish was the only language spoken. And so sometimes emotionally, when I'm expressing myself, sometimes Spanish is probably the best way because it really captures the feeling. And I think that came from coming from a Spanish speaking household.
Yeah. And growing up bilingual, there are certain words that just work better in Spanish
Mhm. Yeah.
than in English. So I understand that.
Yeah.
So, so you said that in the book that your mother was the storyteller in the family. And where was your mother from?
So my mother was from Mexico. She was from the Chihuahua, Parral, Delicias, Valle de Zaragoza area of Mexico. And she was one of 13. And she had an eighth grade education. And she came to the U.S., for a better life. So she really had a lot of that immigrant drive. And she was a wonderful extrovert. And yeah, she was a very good storyteller. I think she was really helpful for, especially my older brother and I, to the love of telling stories.
Yeah, yeah, because your brother's a writer as well,
Mhm.
Mario Acevedo, and we had him a few weeks ago here.
Yeah.
Um, so your mother had a lot of vision, and she was able to see how important it was for your brother and for you to learn English before you went to school. And so she arranged for Hermana Diaz, one of the nuns in your local church, to teach you. And, I mean, when I was reading that, I just thought that's amazing that she really was thinking about, preparing you guys before you went to school. And she really worked hard, your mother, for you guys to have a better life. She kept looking forward to a better house here and a better house there. And, she really had a lot of vision. Did you inherit her vision of working hard to get to the next step, do
So,
you think?
I love that question about my mother because believe it or not, one of the things when you're writing a book, you learn a lot about yourself. You think you're telling your story, but even in telling and writing it, you learn a lot about yourself and your family. And that's one of the things that came out in the book is that I thought it was really my story, but it's really, my family story and really my mom's story in so many ways. Also, I didn't realize why it was so important for my mother that my, older brother and I learned English as well as speak Spanish. And when I was writing the book, I realized that, my father was in the Army and he had been stationed in South Dakota. And my mom had, by that time, my older brother. And then I was born in South Dakota. And imagine, like, I think my first year and a half of life or 2 years were in South Dakota. And it was cold. I'm sure no one else spoke Spanish. I know my father used to say that he could immediately tell which baby I was because I was the only one with like hair and black hair to boot. And so I realized, my mother must have been incredibly lonely and realized how important being bilingual was. So that when we went back to Las Cruces, New Mexico, we went to the Spanish Baptist Church, the Primera Iglesia Bautista, and there was Hermana Diaz, the missionary, and she was bilingual. And my mother coaxed her into creating a makeshift school in behind kind of the church rectory. And there, I remember we had a table and she put a flag up and had one of these scrolling tablets with the alphabet and numbers. And, my mother would take us there. And my first song in English that I sang was Jesus Loves the Little Children, all the children in the world. But I really do think that my mother, she saw the importance of that. My father did speak English, but my mom was the one that really pushed us to, be bilingual and to learn English. And then you mentioned looking at different neighborhoods where the schools were, and that's because, my mom realized the area we were living in, even though we loved our neighbors and I really enjoyed it, there were also challenges in that neighborhood. So she moved us into a different part of town. So she was always kind of thinking, how can I came to the United States for a better life for myself and my children. And so I think she made a lot of decisions with that mindset.
Yeah. Where was your father from?
My father was born from El Paso, and all my grandparents are from Mexico. On my father's side, on one side of the family, they were from northern Mexico, Chihuahua, and then from the other side, they were mostly from central Mexico, and then had come to the border after the revolution. So my dad's family was, like all his grandparents, and they're from Mexico.
Wow. So I did forget to tell the audience to try to pay attention to Sylvia's answers to these questions, because we do have the book giveaways. So make sure you remember to pay attention. We won't make it too hard. I know when I was reading your book, I've met your brother before, Mario, and so it was kind of fun to read your book because it's like, hey, I know Mario. And it was just kind of neat to read about him as he was growing up with you. So it's your whole family story.
Yeah, and
One
my brother was so helpful, because I was writing the book. He really helped me kind of fill out some of the memories, or to reinforce them, and I would say, hey, I remember something this way, and he'd say, yeah, that was exactly how it happened. So he was incredibly helpful.
So he really encouraged you to write this book too, didn't he?
Yes, he really did. Yeah.
Good. So you have a sister named Laura, and at 19 months, your sister became seriously ill with meningitis. Now, how did that affect your whole family?
Yeah, that was really one of those life inflection points for my entire family. There was the last meningitis epidemic in the entire United States was in our neighborhood. And we lived at that time, on dirt streets. We always lived paycheck to paycheck. And, I did like the neighborhood. I loved my neighbors. I loved the fun number of kids that were always out, playing. But unfortunately, a meningitis epidemic did sweep through that neighborhood, and many people died. And my younger sister, she became sick with it. And unfortunately, she had such high fever that it changed her brain forever, and she became special, more in the Special Olympics kind of way, which is incredibly sad because my sister was the smartest of us all. She was in such a hurry to catch up with my older brother Mario and I that she skipped crawling, and she immediately went to walking and running, and she was bilingual at a very early age. And at that point, my mother was so sad and grief-stricken and depressed. But she was the mama bear, and she realized that the only area where people got sick and died from that was our neighborhood with dirt streets. And so my mother looked for another part of town where the streets were paved and the schools were better, and she moved us. And that was incredibly difficult because we had so many friends and we really enjoyed it. And I went from a neighborhood of Sanchez, Gomez, Santiago, Comunes to, the Glomboskis, the Shrams, the Wallaces, the Boudreaux. It was a totally different neighborhood. And it was really hard, and I didn't like it at all. And it really changed my personality. I used to be incredibly fearful. I would always be locking the doors. I remember sometimes I would accidentally lock out my brother, and he'd come home after me, and he's like banging on the door, and he'd say, you don't have to lock things so much here. But, it was really tough, but I understood why my mom did it, because she wanted to really protect her family.
Yeah. Yeah. But a
Yeah.
big
But a big
change
change
for all of
for
you.
all of you. Yes.
So, a
So
life changing moment for you was the day you were invited to go to a brownies meeting, and you were hoping your mother would have said that you could not go, but
Right.
she said yes. And you had to go. How do you think that would have affected your future if she had said no?
I've thought a lot about that, especially, as I was writing the book, because at that time, I really did not like, the neighborhood. I had not adjusted well. I would leave for school at the very last minute. I would come home for lunch every day. I really didn't like it at all. And I think that's why my mom really encouraged me to go, because she saw that I had changed from this outgoing, friendly girl with friends to, really shy, introverted girl, really fearful. So I do wonder what it would have taken to get me outside of my, to change me so much. What other experience could have done that? Because when I went to that Girl Scout meeting, I saw that there were girls doing all these fun things. They were planning to go to a park. They were doing an arts and crafts, and I was just so touched by that. And even in one of the arts and crafts experiments or exercises, we were cutting paper and cloth so that we could create what they call a sit upon, something you could sit upon when they're going to go to the park. And the girl next to me asked for the scissors, and I handed her the scissors, but with a pointy end. And they stopped the meeting, and I thought, uh-oh, what did I do? And they stopped the meeting, and the troop leader asked for some girls to demonstrate the right way to pass scissors. And I was like really embarrassed, but they didn't make me feel embarrassed. But the girls, and I still remember them, Liz Brittle and Cindy Burt, they got up and they demonstrated, how you pass it, not with the blade, but with the handle part, the other handle part in first. And then the girl turned to me and said, and another rule, never run with scissors. And I thought, I didn't know there was any rules, much less at least two rules. But then something else overcame me, which is I thought to myself as a young girl, my family had experienced so much tragedy, and here was this organization that cared about me so much that they even cared about how I passed scissors. And I thought, wow, they're going to really take care of me. And I just fell in love with Girl Scouts.
And they really did take care of you.
Yeah, they did. They did.
So one thing, because being an being an engineer, I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of sexism in your workplace. But even as a child, because in the Latin culture we have what is called machismo, which is like sexism on steroids. I think I don't know what we'd call it, but at an early age, though, you were pretty young and you were recognizing these double standards that you had to deal with, especially I think because you had your older brother, you know, being treated differently than you. And for example, like one day when you wanted to get a library card, which is awesome, we're all for libraries, you had to save $5 in order for you to get the card. But your brother, Mario, he didn't have to save anything to get a library card. He just got it when you got your card. So you knew the rules were sometimes different for you, but despite all of these obstacles throughout your life, what kept you determined to continue your path?
Yeah, I did learn that it was sort of just a given that there would be favoritism to my older brother. I think also it was pretty challenging for my brother because I was very, very competitive. And I think my dad liked to sort of pit us against each other. But I never understood, even if I was good, I was great in math and science and I would get straight A's. And I remember when I told my dad I wanted to be an engineer, and he said, but you have to be good at math. And I remember thinking, you sign my report cards, I get straight A's. Um, so, I think that when I was in Girl Scouts, I learned I could do math and science. I made a rocket. It took me a lot of trial and error, and I finally did it. And so I had that feeling of accomplishment that I could do it. So even though a lot in society was telling me that I couldn't, I had that inner confidence within me that I could do it. The other thing was, because I had that great experience young, that about liking math and science, I tended to do more math and science exercises. So when the teacher would assign the even problems, I would do the even and the odd. And I got so good, I started using the teacher's edition, even in elementary school. I really pushed myself. And the better I got at math, the more I wanted to do it. And the more I wanted to do it, the better I got at it. And, I think that gave me so much confidence, so that even when people told me I couldn't do something, I had that inner confidence that I could, because I had that experience that I was good at it.
And even in Girl Scouts, you had to earn badges, and you had to earn a science badge. I think one of your scout leaders kind of like sent you in that direction as well. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I loved my friends in Girl Scouts, and at that time they were earning a cooking badge, and so I wanted to earn a cooking badge just like them. But my troop leader had remembered one night, after we were camping and we were looking at the stars, and she saw me fascinated with that, and I just saw twinkly lights. I didn't realize there were planets, there were stars, there were constellations. And so she sat next to me and pointed out the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and the difference between planets and stars. And I just had no idea about any of that. I just saw twinkly lights up there. And so that fascinated me. So later she remembered that, and she encouraged me to earn my science badge. And she told me I could earn my cooking badge too, but that I could also earn my science badge. And I'm grateful, because that taught me and gave me that confidence that really helped me like math and science.
Yeah, yeah. And you did earn your cooking badge, but you
I
did
did.
have a few trial and errors.
That's true too. I'm glad I did it at the same time, because my family, if you remember, my mom's Spanish speaking. So it was the era before the, search engines online. So if you wanted a cooking recipe, you had to go to a book, and our cooking books in Spanish, our cookbooks were at home were all in Spanish. And by that time I was a little confident. My mom said, I wanted to make galletas de cacahuate, peanut butter cookies. And my mom asked if I needed help, and I said, I got this. And I did. I looked at the recipe, and I misinterpreted one of the ingredients. And instead of putting a teaspoon of salt, I ended up putting a taza, which is a cup of salt. And so it tasted really bad. And unfortunately for my brother Mario, the salt did not change the look. It did not change the smell. But he came home right when they were cooling, and he immediately grabbed one and bit it, and he spat it out. And to this day, he never tastes any of my cooking first. He makes me take it and test it first. But that was important, because my mom taught me several things. She said, one, there's hardly any ingredient that you would eat, any meal you would prepare, that would ever require a cup of salt. So first things first. And then, we didn't have any, peanut butter was really expensive, and we didn't have much money, and I couldn't couldn't earn my badge because I hadn't been successful making something. So we looked at what we did have. We had flour, we had yeast, we had tomato sauce. So my mom said, okay, let's make pizza. And in that case, when you make yeast and prepare it, my mom again said, do you need help? And I said, okay, instructions are in English. I got this. And so it said warm. And I thought, yeast warm, I may put boiling hot water on that yeast, which basically killed it. So my dough didn't rise. So I had to go ask my mom again. And then she taught me again that whenever you're cooking and it's warm, she said, make it so that the water's slightly uncomfortable, but not hot, but slightly uncomfortable on your wrist. And that's the right temperature for the yeast. This time she watched me and supervised me. And yay, my yeast rose, and I could make the pizza with cut up hot dogs, little weeny cut up hot dogs. And my brother did eat some of that. but he didn't take the first bite. But I remember thinking that cooking was just like science. You have to problem solve, you have to get the ingredients right, you have to have the heat right. And it was just like building my rocket. So it was really great exercise for me to be doing at the same time as earning my rocket and, earning my science badge, making rockets.
Yeah, it is about science. So are you a pretty good cook today? Do you enjoy cooking?
Not really. Not really, but I can cook all right. I don't go hungry.
So one thing that in the book you talked about, you had an internship one summer, um, and and it was with a laboratory, and for some reason, there was no bathrooms for women at that time near that laboratory. So you actually had to ride a bike to the bathroom. And when you got your lab outfit or the lab suit, you actually had to custom, make it with duct tape or however you did it, just so that it would fit, because they didn't have them for women. And recently, in the news, like a few years ago, we discovered that NASA only had one spacesuit for one woman to do spacewalks, and that kind of like, you know opened up a lot of people's eyes. It definitely opened mine. Like, we've had female astronauts for a while now, and so why do we only have one spacesuit for women? Are you surprised that women continue to have some of the same obstacles that you yourself experienced?
Yeah, our buildings really reflect, who builds them and society norms and expectations. And when I started, there really weren't very many female engineers, and I was in the testing area, and so there was like no test engineers at all. So they didn't. Why bother having a women's bathroom? So they also thought I wasn't going to persist and stick it out. But I was very grateful. My father had given me a big pep talk before I started that job, and he told me, don't quit, be persistent, always be incredibly helpful, be positive, really try to make sure your work gets done. If you're done, see if you can help others as well. And when I didn't have a bathroom there, I just solved the problem and I brought a bike in. And after 6 weeks, they finally said, okay, she's not going to quit. And they brought me my own porta potty. It said hers on it. But, I also served on the White House Presidential Commission, and women's bathrooms were an afterthought there too. In fact, they added them after the buildings had been built. So when you'd have a meeting, men's bathrooms were very conveniently spaced. The women's bathrooms, because they had been added on after the building had been made, were like in really inconvenient spots. So in a meeting, all of us during a break, all the women would have to run to get to the nearest bathroom, and then finally like get back. And the guys would be like, come on, let's start the meeting. And we're like, we had to go all the way, sometimes to another floor. And the same thing was true in Congress. It really wasn't that long ago until they finally had women's bathrooms in Congress as well. So, our buildings really reflect, what some of our society norms are.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, they still do.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so I'm going to let the audience know that one of our trivia questions, if you want to get a book today, let me know what state of Mexico did Sylvia's mom come from? And so that's one question. And then the other question is, what was the first recipe that Sylvia tried to cook? And so those are the two questions. So answer us if you want to win a free book. And I'm going to get to the next question. So the next question, because your relationship with your father in the book, you describe it as that it was pretty difficult, because you kept making untraditional choices for the time period and also for your culture. And yet you persisted, you kept going, and you weren't going to back down. And at what point do you feel you and your father's relationship had finally changed for the better?
That's an important question. And I wanted to leave out the part about my dad's and my difficulties out of the book. But the publisher, and specifically the editor at the publisher, Harcourt Mifflin Houghton, she's like, no, it's an important part. And I'm grateful that she did, because as I have gone and talked to so many kids and students and about their lives, there are some of them that also have challenging relationships with the parent, and that gives them a lot of hope. And for me, after I graduated from high school and I had this opportunity to have the internship at Sandia Labs, my father drove me the 4 hours from Las Cruces to Albuquerque. And he also helped me set up where I was going to live. And, I hadn't, it'd been a long time since I'd had that much time with my father in a car. And I think he talked the entire time, but he gave me really great advice about working, and especially working in a lab, and what it would be like for me. And he told me things like, they're going to try to tease you. And he said, they're going to ask you to go find a left-handed monkey wrench. And he said, don't let it get to you. They're just going to try to, test you and test your mettle and stuff. And, in a way that finally allowed my father to show a degree of care and concern and love. And we really, it was a really wonderful experience. And that's really when it started to turn. And I really like in the book, at the end, you can really see that we made a lot of progress of coming together.
I bet he was really proud of you.
Oh, yeah.
Especially because he was an engineer as well, wasn't he?
Well, he was actually a chemist, but you're right. He was very, very proud. And especially after I graduated from Stanford University, he had a coffee cup. And I know that his coworkers would say, oh my God, my dad took that coffee cup with him all day at work. And if somebody came in that didn't know and say, oh, why do you have a Stanford coffee cup? My father would say, oh, my daughter went to Stanford. So he was incredibly proud.
Yeah, well, that's very proud. You talk about how numbers calmed you down when you would get upset with him, or probably just even had difficult times with anyone. Do numbers still help you calm down in difficult situations?
Yeah, I remember that so clearly. I'd had a really difficult time with my father. It was a really bad fight that we had. And I knew I had homework still to do in math. And I started to do the homework in my head about what we were learning. And from there, I learned about the base 10 system, and I figured out like the power of 5 and all sorts of things based on the base 10 numeral system. And it was like so fascinating that I figured that out. And so then I really got into that. And I realized I just felt so much better. I wasn't as emotional because I had kind of gotten lost in math. And so whenever I had challenges with my dad, I really started going back and doing math problems. And now I know that it means I was in a different, one part of your brain is more the emotional part. The other part is the more analytical, mathematical part. And so I had moved myself from, the emotional part into the analytical part, and that really calmed me down. And to this day, there's this game called Sudoku, which is a numbers game. And I do that a lot to just kind of calm me down. If I'm feeling anxious or whatever, I just pull out the Sudoku game, and it's like, okay, life is okay again.
So, especially because right now life is kind of difficult for a lot of people with the pandemic going on. So maybe everybody should be working on math right now.
That's right.
I loved math as a kid growing up too. So, what has been the reception of your book with your readers, your friends, and your family? How have they responded?
I have had just such amazing response to the book. It's really been incredibly touching. I was in St. Louis, and some generous person bought, I think, 400 copies of the book. And the librarian, she told me this really impactful story. She said there was this young boy in her reading group that she would read to, and she could never reach him. He, no matter what she did, he never paid attention, never participated. But when she was reading my book and she would read the part about where I translated in English and Spanish, he said, "Oh, I do that. It is so exhausting." And she said, "Oh my God, he speaks." And he, so she engaged him, and he talked about how much, he saw himself in my book. And she was able to have a connection with him and began to foster that connection so that she learned more about his interest and was able to help him learn better and read better. And I was really touched by that story. Another time I was in Cleveland, Ohio, and there was a young girl, and she heard I was going to be in town, and she took time off school to meet with me and to meet me. And her mother told me that her daughter went to bed every night with my book, hugging it, because she somehow wanted whatever essence I had, and she wanted to absorb it. And so her daughter would read it. And then another time I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and this girl came up to my book reading, and I had a sense that she was somewhere on the autism spectrum. And I know that, in that case, you don't try to hug them or, and her mom said, my daughter really likes math. And she was a middle school girl. And so I started talking about math, and I probably talked about math for 5 minutes. The daughter never said anything. And then the mother said, "Can I have a picture with the both of you?" And I said, "Sure." And so we took a picture, and then they left. And the girl had never said anything to me. Well, a few minutes later, the mother comes back, and the mom is crying. And I thought, oh no, what happened? And she said, "We live 5 hours away from here. When my daughter, in the Appalachia of Kentucky," she goes, "when my daughter found out you were going to be in Kentucky, she said, we're going to go see her, and I want to take time off school." So they got up really early, drove there. We're in line for a while, and then I had that interaction. And then they're getting back in the car. The girl looked at the mom and said, "This has been one of the greatest moments of my entire life." And then they were going to get in a car for 5 hours. The stories like that, experiences like that, I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to write the book and get it published. I know I have so many people who are just so grateful that the book is in Spanish as well. And they tell me about how, unfortunately, a lot of Latino kids, they don't keep their Spanish in middle school. They just have family Spanish. They can talk the abuelita Spanish, as people have told me. But the book allows their parents to read it in Spanish and the kid to read it in English and have a common experience. And that has made me feel really wonderful to hear those kinds of stories of families reading the book together.
Yes. I think that's great because even though it is written for children, I think this is a great book for adults as well.
I have to tell you, I have so many moms. This is like a mom book. I have so many moms. In my book signings, there'll be a mother, and I'm like, "So who do I sign this to?" And they'll be like, "Well, to me." I'll be like, "Okay." So now I don't assume that the book is just for a child or a gift. It's really, it can be for a mom. And a lot of people have told me that they bought the book for their mother.
Well, I really enjoyed reading your book. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and I could relate to a lot of what you said. I want to know is what's next for you.
Oh, thanks for that question. I've just recently left the Girl Scouts. I was 8 years on the national board, 4 years as the CEO, made a massive, massive impact. I left quite a legacy, 144 new badges, many of them in STEM, the outdoors, leadership, entrepreneurship. I feel really good about that. And now I'm going to be taking a little bit of time, but then I'm going to be focused on how can I give back in technology. They really need folks that have diverse backgrounds in technology to make sure that, the solutions that are created, because the world is being redesigned around technology, line by line, code by code, and they need to have diverse voices there. And I want to make sure that, I know I can contribute, and I'd really like to contribute in that fashion.
That's wonderful. We do need, and we appreciate you wanting to do that as well, because we do need you. Um, we did have a surprise question. So I don't know if you watched your brother's interview, but Mario had a question for you. And his question is it true that your older brother, Mario, is smarter than you?
You know what? Of course, my older brother is smarter than me.
So I wish we had asked you a question for him when we did his interview. But I do have a question for you. And he could maybe answer it as well. He could email me, let me know. Um, do you think the reason you are stronger than your brother is because you are a woman and had to work harder than Mario?
Oh gosh, my brother, he's a soldier, he's a ranger, he's a veteran. He is a Renaissance man. Not only is an engineer, he's incredibly skilled. Not only as an artist, he's great building things as well. So, my brother has just had so many amazing experiences. He's an accomplished author, an accomplished artist. He has artwork. He probably was too modest. He has artwork hanging in the Pentagon. And if you ever see those, I know, if you ever see those big army books, my brother has several, of his artwork in there. So like my brother will be remembered forever. And I'm just, he's amazing. I'm really grateful. Just recently, I was named to be one of the 40 Latinos who shaped the U.S. for the Smithsonian. And so I'm really grateful to be acknowledged that way. So, my brother's in the Pentagon and I'm in the Smithsonian. So that's kind of nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. One part of the book that touched me quite a bit is when you were writing about the first Christmas, because Mario had gone to West Point, which I didn't know he even had been in West Point. When he had his first semester back from West Point, he gave you a gift that really made you realize all these years that your brother he's always been on your side and was really appreciating you for yourself, and I just love that part.
I was so grateful for writing the book. I learned so much. And one of the things was that experience as well. When you think about, we were very competitive. And I think we both made each other stronger because of that competition. And sometimes I think I misinterpreted that competition as not loving, but he really did. And he, even though my father may have treated us different, my brother always treated me as an equal. And I didn't see that as a young girl. I think I was always trying to get my dad's attention, but my brother saw me as an equal. And when he came back from West Point and he had his own money, and he saw that I always liked sports, but being in a Latina family, that was not encouraged. And he bought me these tennis shoes, and these were amazing leather athletic shoes. From Europe, and they were like, I'm just, I was in seventh heaven. And the fact that he had recognized that was really so meaningful.
Oh, yeah, no, I really love that part of the book. So Sylvia, I just want to say I can't wait to see what else you do for what your next step. If you decide to write another book, I'll be ready to read it, and I'm sure our audience will too. We did have two winners. So Brenda and Nancy, they remembered that you made peanut butter cookies. with one, Galletas de cacahuate con una taza de sal
Salt.
with 1 cup of salt. But you know, that's easy to. I think that would have been an easy mistake because growing up bilingual, hey, you know, sometimes you make those mistakes. But thank you so much, Sylvia, to be with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and you know, I just really appreciate you helping be a part of our 7th annual Latino Book Festival. Um, this was really fun, and it's the first time that we had a brother and sister on a festival. So hopefully, one day we'll be able to bring you both to Pueblo,
Uh-huh.
and have you get to have a little family reunion.
Well, Latinos were very strong about family. So it kind of makes sense. And I want to thank you for being a trailblazer and making this happen for others. It's so important. People think things are just the way they are, you know. Benefits like this just happen. Well, they happen because of people like you. So thank you very much for your leadership and being a trailblazer and a pioneer.
Thank you. The library here in Pueblo has been really great about supporting the Hispanic community. So I've been really lucky to be in this position, and we're really Pueblo loves our library, and I know why. We do fun stuff. Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you everyone out there who's been watching and participating. So thank you
Thank
very much, and have a great